Hello everyone, Jester Bell is back with a review of an excellent comic called Batman the Dark Prince Charming. This is a very under the radar comic. It's written and illustrated by Enrico Marini, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who is a European artist who apparently was asked to do a Batman comic. And I'm very glad that he did, because this is one of the best Batman stories I've ever read, and it's definitely the best Batman story I've read in the modern age. I think there are some good stories that come out from comics these days, but most of them are very bland and forgettable. You only find some really, really good stories from these characters on rare occasions, and even then, I think that they have a lot more competition if you put them up to what used to be released regularly from comics. This is just a perfect Batman story, though. It's not particularly deep. It's not like, it doesn't say anything brand new about the characters really, but it's a original story, and it keeps everybody in character, and it's really tightly written, and the art is amazing. And I'll talk about the art first. Like I said, this is a European illustrator who's doing this, and it's just such a unique style because it's an alternate universe where all of the Batman characters are basically in a European setting, and so all of their designs are made to match that, and it's just really interesting to see. For example, I think Catwoman's design in this book is my favorite, where she's got kind of ripped at the torso and the legs, but Joker's design, very different, a bit similar to the Joker movie design where he has blue around his face. He and Harley have kind of a very traditional, almost 1920s clown look to them, and it's really interesting to look at and to see the different clothes people wear in this universe and the different culture around it, and it immediately draws you in. It's what drew me into this book in the first place. But story-wise, it gets even better. It's, again, an original story. This is about a woman comes to Bruce Wayne's house with a daughter, and she claims that it's his daughter, and she demands he pay her a hefty sum of money for support. And Bruce Wayne does not trust this woman. We get a little subtle nod. He sees pin marks in her arm, indicating he just thinks he's going to take the money for drugs. And we don't really get a reveal of why Bruce is completely rejecting her, other than that. Is she really the mother of this child? Is he really the father of this child? Does he think she's lying about it? He doesn't acknowledge it at all. He just says, I'm not giving you anything, go away. And that's kind of him playing up his carefree playboy his playboy persona that he has. But it seems this is an edgier Bruce Wayne, with him just outright rejecting this lady, and we get an edgier Bruce in general throughout the story, but he's still very much in the vein of the version we got in the Kevin Conroy version in Batman TAS, where he still really cares about people. There was always more going on in his head, and you see that, and so you keep watching him and seeing what he's going to do next. This is very much Kevin Conroy Batman Bruce Wayne, and we get a foreword in the story by Enrico Marini talking about how he's a huge fan of that series and how this is inspired by that. And I think that Batman the Animated Series is definitive Batman, and nothing has ever compared to it. So just reading this story from that style, it made me feel right at home. I know who these characters are. I'm familiar with them. They're not completely 100% the same. There's a little bit of the writer's own style and what he wants to do with them in the story, which is perfectly fine. It makes it interesting to read. It's different, yet it's familiar. So, the story continues where this little girl, whose name is Alina, gets kidnapped by the Joker, who seems to have this weird connection with her, and all of a sudden Batman does a DNA test on the little girl, and he discovers something about who her true parents are that makes him really, really want to save her and really, really invested in her all of a sudden. And really driven, and you question, did he find out that he really is her father? What's going on here? And so we have Bruce Wayne, Batman, trying to rescue this little girl, and it's a very interesting. This is a really good little girl character. Usually, when you try to have the little kid who's supposed to be really smart in stories, you end up hating them because they become annoying. She is not annoying. She's really interesting. She's not trying to prove she's better than everyone else. she's really smart. There's things she knows, she's just knowledgeable about. For example, there's a point in the story where Harley accuses this girl of going to be giving the Joker Stockholm syndrome, because she says that the Joker's attention is on this little girl now, not her, and she's angry with that and says that accuses the little girl of giving the Joker Stockholm syndrome. And Alina says, no, that's Lyme syndrome. That's when the captor falls in love with his patient. Harley is angry with that, but it's an example of how Alina knows she's knowledgeable, but it's not shoved in your face constantly. It just is a character trait. You're supposed to see that she's very smart. She stands up to the Joker throughout the entire story, and she stands up to Bruce Wayne for thinking that he's not a very good person, for rejecting her and her mother in the first place. And we also get little hints about how she's bullied, but she always stands up to them. But unlike Batman, she definitely does seem a little more lethal. And here's where I'm going to get into spoilers. She almost lets the Joker die. She would have straight up let him die at the end because she thought he deserved it. So she's really more about, lethal but deserved justice. She's not like Batman with a no-kill rule, which is very integral to the story, because we hear about how the Joker really seems to be, he sees a lot. He keeps saying he sees a lot of himself in this kid. Now, before I get into the big spoilers, let me just talk a little bit more of the details. Joker's characterization is very funny in this story. He's very much, again, this is a Batman animated series inspired book. He's very much in the same vein of Mark Hamill, and he has so many good jokes and so many good lines, especially his dialogue between him and Alina is very funny. He is more flamboyant in this version and a more slightly campy. I would just say flamboyant, going as far as to disguise himself as a very sultry, that's the milder word for it, waitress at one point. He seems to care a little more about Harley in this version. Well, I think that's just a little more accurate. They are supposed to have a bit more of a relationship than him just not caring. Someone I saw criticize him and said that he's obsessed with Harley. I don't see that here. He says he wants to get her a present for her birthday, and he seems to actually want it. But then he gives her something, and she hates it, and she throws it back in his face, and he just doesn't care. He's just like, afterwards. So yeah, it's a good characterization. It's on par with what was done in Harleen with how Joker relates to Harley. He does like her, but there is it's up to a point where he will throw it out and he just won't care anymore. We do get a lot of funny lines between them. One I particularly liked where he gets angry. This is what I mean, up to a point. He is angry with her for constantly being ungrateful. He says he captured Alina to get Harley a present, as ransom, which is part of it, but there's an ulterior motive. That is part of his motivation, though. And he's angry now because she never seems to be grateful for anything that he gives her. And so he points a gun at her and says, did we agree not to kill each other? And Harley says, pull that trigger and we're through. It's over between us. So it's good to get that kind of dark humor between them again in that relationship. I will talk about one negative thing, and I think one of the only negative things in this book is that Harley's characterization, it's fine. It's not really great, though. This version is very reminiscent of the Bruce Timm Paul Dini animated series version, except it's a very whiny, very bratty version of her, as you might have been able to tell. And she's come off as a little unlikable. We don't see any of the sympathetic aspects of her character. We don't see any of the smarter aspects of her character. She's just kind of stupid, and she's just wants to get her way all the time. And I find her entertaining because I think the Arlene Sorkin voice was mimicked in here, and her banter with Joker is very entertaining, and some of the kind of ditziness of her is funny, but generally she just seems to be kind of an unlikable portrayal of the character. I like the style of the way she looks, but I don't really like how she's still made to look pretty trashy. Harley never seemed trashy to me, and I'm tired of us going that route. Anyway, so to get to the big twist, so this whole book is revolving on Batman has to rescue this child. He's very invested in her. All of a sudden, the audience thinks it's probably his child. This is where spoilers come. We get a flashback where he meets the waitress and she flirts with him and makes you think, oh, did he do anything? Is this really their child? But we also keep getting hints in the story that she has a mark on her face. Joker keeps saying that they relate a lot and he really likes this kid, reminds her of the way he used to be when he was a kid. And by the end of the story, there's indication. It's pretty much almost confirmation that this is the Joker's daughter and not Batman's daughter, because he not only refers to her as my little princess at one point. This would be how this version of the Joker would talk, but there's just enough connecting points between them, and then we get a scene at the very end revealing that the Joker actually met that waitress at the end. So it's indicating, all lining up, it appears that this is really Joker's daughter. Really interesting setup, because we see her show all the signs. We think it could be Bruce Wayne's daughter, because she seems to be very determined like him, and she pushes back like he does. But it ends up lining more about how the way the Joker is, especially with how she ends up almost throwing the Joker out the door and letting him die at the end. That's more in line with how he would be. But this girl seems to have a desire to become a police officer, to use it for justice later on. Just such an interesting dynamic between these characters, to have this be the way that the Joker's potential daughter is, and to make her a very interesting character, and to have this dynamic between them, because Bruce Wayne adopts her at the end. Like I said, it's a very original story. It's a very tightly written story. It's not that long. I got through it in a couple hours, I think. Not a couple hours. I'm a slow reader. I got through it pretty quickly. It didn't take me multiple days or anything. It's tightly written. I didn't catch any plot holes in it. I love all the characterizations. The changes that they did make to the characters, I thought were all very interesting, except maybe Harley just wasn't as good. But this is probably one of the best Batman stories, if not the best to come out. It might be the most solid Batman story that I think that has come out in the last decade. Might be going too far. It's one of the most solid modern comics I've read. It's just really good. I would highly recommend it. It's getting a little harder to find, and it's getting more expensive, because this is it's almost a prestige book. They invited him to write it. It kind of flew under the radar, even though they advertised it a little bit. I remember seeing the advertisements, but most people haven't read this book. I really hope that you would pick up Batman the Dark Prince Charming after this. If you're a fan of Batman or Batman the Animated Series, you won't be disappointed at all. So, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.